Hello, my name is Edward Ng, and I'm a registered psychologist with Eastgate Psychological Services here in Vancouver, BC. One of the tenets of Eastgate is an attempt to integrate theological reflection with psychological principles for the benefits of our clients. And since I'm a former church pastor and still a professing Christian, I do tend to see a number of clergy in my practice. It's in the course of seeing so much clergy that I've begun to see how there are unique stresses in the lives of pastors. As Dr. Margaret Clark so helpfully pointed out in a previous video in this series, some of these may include things like high expectations or social isolation, and the reality that even the personal characteristics of the pastor can outright lead to denial of career advancement. Left unmetabolized, these stresses can lead to a unique kind of burnout that's probably all too familiar for those of you watching today. But let's face facts. It's mostly impossible for church ministers to avoid stress, no matter how much psychologists tell them to. The question then is, how do you cope with them? How do you cope with that kind of stress? I want to focus in on something that's common to all resilience studies, and that's the importance of community in developing and sustaining psychological frameworks that can bounce back from stress. Now, maybe the best way for me to illustrate this is to walk you through a case study of mine. Now, you should know in advance that when I share case studies, I do change significant details. So it's pure coincidence if this story sounds like someone you know, or even sounds like you. Having said this, I'm reminded of a person I worked with named Roberta. Roberta was a 35-year-old single woman who was serving as a young adults pastor in an ethnic Korean church. And during the intake process, she told me that she was suffering from burnout. And then along with this, she had things like insomnia, was experiencing weight and hair loss, and that she'd recently taken medical leave from the church because she simply couldn't bring herself to even go up to the front doors of the church without suffering a panic attack. Now, psychology tends to oversimplify the development of anxiety or trauma in such a way that it appears like 1 + 1 = 2. Now, they do this in order to keep it simple for students and the general public. But the reality is, the development of anxiety or trauma is usually multifaceted and multivariate. So it's not just one thing in the life of a minister that goes wrong that usually leads to anxiety or trauma. It's a bunch of things that, when factored together, makes it all more like calculus than plain arithmetic. And so it was with Roberta. What triggered Roberta's acute anxiety was that she was asked to adjudicate between two people who were involved in an abusive relationship in her congregation. Her feelings of helplessness that resulted from this led in part to her dreading her work with the people. And I won't go through everything she was experiencing, but the one thing I noticed was how alone she seemed in facing all her stresses. Whether it was congregational relationships or the stress of being a single woman in a church that exalted marriage as the ultimate glory of womanhood, Roberta felt like she had to face it all alone. If there's one thing I hear over and over again from pastors, it's how isolated and alone they feel in their work. Although some of the same can be said of other professions, the varied roles in which pastors find themselves and the ways in which they must care are absolutely unique. Amongst other roles, pastors are often scholars, teachers, counselors, arbitrators, administrators, community mobilizers, and fundraisers. They're not allowed to focus on one thing at a time, and that means the stress pulls them apart, as no one can do all of these things. But a typical pastor is expected to, and all at the same time. My work with Roberta was first about establishing a renewed sense that she was not without resources and that she was not alone. Now, this was done by validating her experience and gently helping her feel as though she wasn't crazy after all. But then the second phase of work centered around Roberta feeling empowered to seek community outside of the people she served. In the end, What was most helpful for Roberta was to develop friendships with pastors from other congregations. When it comes to pastoral ministry, there are so many little nuances to the work that many times only other ministers can understand it. And this is the thought I'd like to leave you with today. If you are a church minister, you need friends outside of your church. Easier said than done, I know. But it's vital to find space where you can be yourself, warts and all, without fear that somehow you're going to have your words and behaviors thrown back into your face. Now, it's not easy to meet other pastors, it's true, but Roberta managed it. She managed it by first of all calling up old classmates of hers who were also in ministry of one kind or another. And then she cold called pastors in her area, and she asked them out for coffee. And then she kept on seeing me, not because she had identifiable symptoms that needed treatment. Instead, Roberta used our time together and as space to hear herself think and feel, and to connect this with how she was perceiving God's presence in her life. And in that space, Roberta realized that she actually didn't need more skills to deal with the work she had. She needed friends who took her as she is. She needed the validation of others who were going through similar things. And she needed validation that told her that it was okay to feel frustrated, to feel uncertain, or to even feel sad. This is the kind of space that I hope for all of you who are clergy and are feeling pulled apart by your ministry. We all need safe people who can listen to us be honest about where we are and the difficulty of what we're doing. For some, that's a circle of other pastors. For others, that's going to be the object of their work with counselors like me. Whatever that is, community is key in building pastoral resilience. So a question to ponder is, in what ways do you have community outside of your church? And in what ways, if you don't have it, are you avoiding it? Once again, my name is Ed Ng. Hopefully, there was something good for you today. Thank you for watching.